Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Academy. On this episode, we're going to go through level design, HUD implementation, and the main menu. So on this episode, we hope to go through pause, setting up the health and coin trackers, and then also going over how to make a main menu. So when you first start up the game, it'll say like play, check out the credits, and quit. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so welcome back to our scene. So this is a little bit of a level we've been working on. If you want to check out all the elements, here's the player coin, some of the platforms. So the player will jump from platform to platform, collecting some coins, jumping over things. So we're doing a little bit of a challenge, teaching the player how to jump. Now we're teaching the player how to use the hook shot mechanic, jump up, grab a coin, jump up, grab a coin, and so forth. The player will continue on, jump up, use the hook shot. Then we have some enemies here that we want we're going to test them by having the player attack the enemies. The player will continue, and then we have an endpoint and a checkpoint. So the player can grab that and move on to the next level. So here's the scene, a little bit zoomed out. So as you can see, we've been designing something. We got a background image there. We have a couple you can choose from. And you can see all the elements are to the left there. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is how to place objects in the scene. So first you're going to make prefabs. We have some already made for you if you open up the prefabs. These are objects that already have all the scripts attached to it, and they're basically just easy enough to drag and drop. So you only ever have to make these objects once. So you can see we have coins, endpoints, checkpoints, enemy bots, health pickups, and of course the player. You're not going to want more than one player in the same scene. That'll just bug out things usually. But once the player is in, you should be good to go. If you want to see where the assets are, we usually keep those within 3D assets. The only thing is they don't have any scripts attached to them. So when making prefabs, you're going to have all the components already made, and then you're going to attach them all together and turn them into prefabs. So let's talk a little bit about level design here. So basically what you want to keep in mind is teaching the player things in small groups. So first we start out by teaching the player how to jump and that coins mean something, teach the player about health, and just letting the player gradually experiment with all the mechanics. We now test their skills with the hook, with the grapple shot to get up, and then they end the first level. And then they go to the next level, which will be gradually harder. Alright, so now that we've talked a little bit about the level design side of things, I'm going to jump on in and talk about organization. So this is gross to me, and I don't know if you know why, but the primary problem is we have all these platforms scattered throughout, and I kind of want that in the platforms folder. So I'm just going to drag some of these things back into this pretty well organized folder called platforms. So the folders are basically just empty game objects within empty game objects. So I'm going to make sure all the walls are inside. Guess what? Walls. So we have the four height walls. We got some 8 height walls, and we have a floor in there. The floor shouldn't be in there. We're going to fix that in a moment. So see this floor platform. This floor platform should actually be inside the ground because when we're looking at things, we want to make sure we're able to find them nice and easily. If you ever want to find something, you can just double-click the object within the inspector. Here we got a floating platform. Floating platforms belong in floating, so we're going to put that in there. You can also see that we have all of these numbers beside the objects. That's just because that's just what Unity does by default when you duplicate objects. For my purposes, I'm okay with that. But if you have a very unique object with a unique reason, so you might want to rename that. So back here we got a plane. Plane is the default name of this 2D element, but I'm using it as a background. It can be a regular ground or something else. I'm going to call it a background because that makes things easier for the designers to understand what these objects are being used for. Also, I want to put all of these things in one nice grouping. I don't like the fact that we have 10 folders on the top, so I'm just going to call this environment assets. And this folder is going to be used for the platforms, the game assets, everything that's that has to do with level design. So when a level designer comes on in here, he can just work within this folder. I'm going to put the checkpoints in there. And if you want to drag all of them or delete all of them, you can just delete the top folder. I don't recommend doing that unless you are absolutely certain you don't need these things. I'm going to put the player spawn points in there, and you can organize this however you want. I just recommend having a convention going. Looking through, I think I'm going to throw lighting in there because lighting isn't necessary for anything other than affecting the environment, and my level designer is also going to be affecting the lighting of the game, just to make everything feel nice. So I'm going to drag that to the bottom. So here we got the in-game HUD. That's the heads-up display. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about the pause menu. All of that relates to the heads-up display. I'm just going to delete it, mainly because we will be re-implementing it. I'm also going to delete the event system because that's important for the heads-up display to work. So we're just navigating, and you can notice that we're not picking up anything. And that's a problem, and that's because our scripts require the HUD to be implemented to track picking up all the coins. So next, I'm going to deal with picking up the coins, picking up the health, and all of the elements of the HUD that I haven't described yet, and all of these things will work. So I hope you join me for that segment. We're also going to cover the code for that. So I'll see you in a minute.
Welcome back to the Programmer's Corner. Agusha here. Today we're going to be hooking up the menu buttons as well as a pause menu and all the UI stuff. So now to add the HUD elements for the coin tracker, it's very simple. So we already have the code typed up. I'm just going to highlight what needs to be done. So first thing, we need to make sure that we're using Unity Engine UI. The next thing we do is we add a serialized text field, and this is just going to be a Unity object that is a text object, and then we can just update what the text is on it. So now in Update UI, this is going to update the current UI in the text field every time, and what we want to do is check if that text object exists, and if it is, set that text to be the current coins with the string of the slash and then the total amount, so it has the current coins with over how many coins you need to collect. You can set up whatever message you want, but that's what we decided for. And the last thing we got to do is call that function. So in add to total coins, we want it to update, and every single time you set the current coins value in that property, we're just going to add it there as well. So for the health tracker, it's basically the same thing as the coin UI. So we have the using Unity UI. We are also going to have a serialized field with the text object named text. And in Update UI, we're going to check again if the text object exists, and we're going to set the text.text to be the current health.toString. So the toString will convert it so that it's an acceptable type inside the output. So the last thing we have to do is update the UI in the right places. So the first place is going to be in setting the current health, and also then in the awake. And now we're going to send it off to Nathan to implement the health and coin UI.
So in order to get to making a pause menu or even a HUD being heads-up display, we're going to have to start by making something called an event system. The event system is basically going to have a bunch of scripts on it that is going to be responding to the different components that we have on our canvas. So first, add this standalone input module, and that will automatically add an event system script. We don't have to touch that. In fact, I encourage you not to touch that because it could mess up something. Then we go to UI and we add canvas. Now this canvas is going to hold all of our HUD components, be it a pause menu or our heads-up display, the things that are going to be showing how many coins a player has and how much health a player has. Let's leave it alone, but you can see we have all these different options. We're not going to delve too deep into that, but let's go ahead and start adding things to this. Okay, so now that we have our canvas, what we're going to move on to do is switch over to 2D mode. This will allow us to get a proper feel for what it's going to look like on screen. And what we're going to do first is we're going to make our health counter. Our health counter is basically a heart, so we're going to add a UI image, move it up to the top left-hand corner, and use these things called anchor points. They're those little arrows that sort of surround the object into a box, and move them around. See, we can't get it outside the canvas because the canvas is the parent, so we're just going to move it up to the corner here. And once we zero all of these points, left, top, right, it's going to snap the image into those anchor points. And we're just going to change the source image there to the heart UI. So this is going to have the background being the heart, and then on top we're going to have a number that changes, and that's going to determine how much health you have, or rather the character has. Just play around with these numbers, get it to where you want it. Making it look nice is part of UI design, making it look intuitive enough for the player to automatically know what it means. We all kind of know what hearts stand for, usually health or lives. And I'm just going to rename this to health counter, just for organizational purposes, and also I'm going to do a couple other things with it in a moment. So let's create the other element, and this will be our coin counter. Same thing, we're going to add an image, and we're going to put it into the top right-hand corner, right here. And remember to use your anchor points. They're basically what's going to be keeping all of your objects within the scene, within the canvas in the right spot. We're going to use this image here. This is basically going to be sort of like a background for where we're going to put some text inside. Just get to where you want it. See, you can drag it around, but you want to make sure that the anchor points still surround the object well, because sometimes you can run into problems where the object will fly off the screen if they're not properly oriented around the anchor points. Okay, so we got that. We're going to call it a coin counter. And now we have our two art elements. So there's a couple things we have to do now. We have to go to UI, add some text, and that text is going to be our health counter text. And where we want it is right dab in the middle of this object. So we're going to pull its anchor points to the outside of that object. So this text is going to be number 3. It's really hard to see at the moment. We can fix that once we got centered. And see, we can't really see it. But if we zoom in really close, you can kind of see the 3 in the corner. And that's a justification issue. The problem we're having right now is just with the size and justification. So we're going to center justify that. We're going to make it white's better on red. And we're going to change the font size to increase that. It's also not really the font type I want, so I'm going to reselect that. First, I'm going to rename it to Health Counter Text. And then I'm going to change their font type to one I like a little bit better. There we go. So it looks a little bit more robotic. We have all these font types we can choose from. We're going to go with this one. You have to both install that font and also drag it into your project. Okay. So now we have our health counter object and our health counter text. And look at this. So we need some font for this, so we're also going to go to UI, add text, and we're just going to make this onto the right-hand side. So the same thing with the anchor points on this one. It's just we're going to want to drag it to the outside of this object. And because we just want this text to be on the left-hand side, we're going to make sure that the anchor point is justified all the way to the left, and then also go about halfway down the object in the middle. Play around with these things, make sure everything's nice and organized. We're going to make it yellow so you can see it. Change that font type so it looks a little bit more cohesive with the game. increase the font size, and we're going to kind of make it look like it's supposed to be in there. We don't want it overlapping over any of the nice looking art that we have there. And I'm just going to justify it to the right, so it's right up against the next text element that I'm about to add. And that's going to be what our script attaches to, the script that is counting how many coins you currently have. So, we have this text. I'm going to just rename that to coin counter text coins. That's a creative choice. Go to UI, text, and now we're going to actually add the part that's going to be incrementally counting. We're going to call this coin counter text coins collected, because this is going to show how many coins are actually collected. We're going to grab those anchor points. We're going to put them on the opposite side this time. Zero it out so the text is nice and even. Going to center justify that and move it to the left, because we want it right up against the coins text. I'm going to increase that font size to 60. I'm going to check the other one. That's at 74. I think we can probably crank that down to 70. Bump this one back up to 70 because I kind of want to make it feel like they're supposed to go together. And now I'm going to just put in temporary text, because our script's going to automatically change the font that's in here, but I want to make sure that no matter how many coins, as long as it's in the double digits, it won't leave the box, right? Okay, so now that all that's set up, we're just going to make sure we save the project, and now we're going to start hooking these things up so they actually respond to the scripts that we have for picking up health and picking up coins. So let's go ahead and test this. So just hit play, and it's not working. I'm not able to collect the coins here. That's a serious problem. It means the UI is not functional at the moment. So let's go back in and see what the problem is. So let's just hit the player, and on the player is the coin tracker and the health tracker. Let's open this up. And as we can see, under the health tracker and coin tracker, we have a text element that's missing. That's the part of the script that's saying, hey, when you pick up a coin, change this text element, or change this UI element. So what we're going to do is we want to just Control Z that, undo, and we're going to drag in those two text elements that we created. So under health tracker, drag in health tracker text. It could be named whatever you want. And under coin tracker, we're going to drag in the text called coin counter text coins collected, because that's the part where we want to display the coins. And what those scripts are going to do is they're going to replace the text elements that we've already put in there. So let's press play. And first we're going to show you me collecting a few coins here. And let's actually take this time to explore the level a little bit. So I'm going to play through it. You can see that there is a health pickup there that we don't need because we're never taking damage. So you might not want to put a health pickup there. That's an example of bad design when there's no way for you to take damage in the first place. Let's continue onwards. And as you can see, we are collecting coins, and the coin percentage is gradually getting closer and closer to its maximum. We're going to use some of these hook shots here. We might want to space them out a little bit, and we just encountered a problem there. So see that the coin UI is covering the hook shot grapple point. We want to make sure that's not the case, because then we're not being as direct with the player as we could be. So we're just grappling these points, and as you can see, I suck at her game. We're going to grapple it, and perfect. And we're going to grapple up here. So here's our enemies, and when we make contact with them, we deal some damage to ourselves, and oof, you can see that our health is now at 2. So let's avoid the enemies for now. Grapple shot over top of them, and I know there's some health down here, so pay attention to the top left. We can see we have 2 health, and now we have 3. So everything's working the way as intended. So we just have to make sure that once our HUD is all set up, we have to make sure that the text elements are connecting to those scripts that change them. And those scripts are found on the player.
So to start off, we're gonna start with the menus, and what we're gonna do is make a bunch of small functions that we're gonna call when a button is pressed. And the first thing we're gonna do is is loading a new scene. So now we're gonna do the quick game, and this if-else statement isn't written in C#, it's written in a different syntax. So it looks a bit different, but it's the same idea. So we're gonna check if it's running in the Unity editor. If it is, then we're just gonna tell it to stop playing the game. And if it's running in a build, that's the else, then just close the application. So now we're gonna do the display screen and hide screen. These are just turning on and off a game object, which would have the canvas stuff on it. So display screen will just set the object to true, and hide screen would just set it to false. The reason why we're doing it separate is because you can only pass in one parameter. So we're only passing in the game object, we can't pass in what state we want it in. So we're just separating it. You can always make a button call multiple functions, so we can just call it as many times as we want for every object.
All right, so we're back in our scene. And now we're going to make a main menu. So what we have to do is we have to create a new scene, different than our level. And as you can see, it's empty with a camera and a directional light. But we're going to save this, and so I don't delete my existing main menu because I like that one. I'm just going to call this one main menu and create new. So we have this empty scene, main menu. And there are two things we have to add to our hierarchy. We have to add a button manager and an event system. Let's start with the event system because we've already done that before. We're going to make an event system, and we're going to add our standalone input module. Right, and we're already done. Now we're going to move on to our next point, which is creating a button manager. This is going to manage the script that governs our all our buttons in our scene, be it loading a new level or quitting the game or otherwise. So just add a button menu script to that. We've already created that one for you. Button manager, call it that. And drag that one to the top too. Now, we're going to create our canvas. We've done this before, add a canvas, and this is sort of going to be our workspace for a little while. Switch over to 2D so we can properly see what the overall look of our canvas looks like. And let's start by adding an image. This is going to be our background, because otherwise you're just going to see a blank space, and we don't really want that because we've made this beautiful 1920 by 1080 background here. We just have to zero all these out, and it'll automatically snap to the canvas, which the canvas is set to the screen size, which is probably 1920 by 1080. We have that set to our game window, so everything is scaled appropriately. So in our canvas, we have our background. Next, we're going to go to game object and create a empty game object. We're going to create two because we're doing two things right here. First things first, we're going to create our main menu. And that's going to be your main menu screen. And here we're going to create our credit screen. You can have a screen for instructions and whatever, but just for teaching purposes, we're going to show how to just switch between a main menu and a credit scene. All right, so under main menu, we're going to create a game object, UI. We're going to create a text element. This is going to be our title. So let's put that at the top because we want in big text just the misadventures of Eggbot. Now we can hardly see that. Same problem as before, so we're just going to crank the text We're going to make it white. And we're also going to change the font type because I prefer to keep everything consistent and everything looking like it sort of fits within the game, and this robotic-like text works. All right, we're just going to drag that to the middle, roughly. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I want you to feel free to experiment and not be hindered by any sort of expectations that I'm giving you. We're just going to call this the title, so when looking at it just in the hierarchy, we can understand it. Now we're going to create a button. We're going to have several buttons. This one's going to sort of frame what the next few are going to be like. We're just going to copy and paste. You can Control-C, Control-V, and you create a bunch of buttons here. So these are a little small and a little they don't look very good. So by default, they have sort of like these button scripts and images on them, and a text. So I'm just going to first name all of these. So start button, credits button. What you name them doesn't really matter. I'm just naming them this way, so like anyone will know what it is. And it's also sort of like a standard. And we already have some buttons here, so I'm going to have this one be a start button, this one be a credits button, and this one be a quit button. And you can see how they're a little skewed. First I'm going to delete these text elements because the image we put on them already says what they do. So let's just drag this out, make it look nice and big. Credits, drag it out, make it bigger. Quit, drag it out, make it bigger. At least big enough to be legible. Doesn't have to be perfect, unless you want it to be perfect, in which case go ahead. Gonna have quit button. Sort of play around where you want to put them. Where you put them doesn't matter too much, but I would certainly think about how it reads to the player. If the color schemes aren't working for you, go ahead and change those out. Make your own images. Right. We have these buttons, and when we click on them, you can see a little bit of a highlight, but we want to make that a little bit better. So let's switch to the highlighted color. Switch the highlighted color to green. I can change the pure color of it to red, but that doesn't translate very well. So I'm going to change the highlighted color to red and change the color to purple here. We're going to go into play mode, and nothing happened. So let's figure out what happened there. So as we can see, it's changed to green, but it's sticking as white. So the problem what we're having is we're not changing the alpha transparency, and as you can see, it then changed color. Just going to play around a little bit, move things to my liking. So I changed the normal color. What I instead want to do is change the highlighted color, and then it stays the way it is, but when I highlight over it, it changes green. Perfect. All right, I think that's what I want. So now we need to tell these buttons to do something, because at the moment they kind of just flicker colors and look cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our button manager and drag it into the function onClick. Change the button menu to load a scene. So when you hit start, we want to load a scene, and that scene is going to be named after whatever scene we want to load, and it has to be exact text, being uppercase, lowercase, underscores, all of that has to be included. We want to load level 1, so in this box we're going to type in level _ 01. So when you click on this button, let's just try it, it's going to load level 1. This is the level we were working on before. Alright, so that works. Now let's try the quit button, because that one's pretty easy. So this one will just quit out of either the build or out of the play mode. So let's go to button menus, quit game, and it's just a simple yes or no, so we don't have to type anything in. When you hit quit, it quits. We're good. We're going to move on to credits. Now, credits is a little bit different because instead of loading a scene or quitting out of the engine, this is going to stay in this scene, and it's going to turn off the existing main menu overlay stuff, like all the buttons, and it's going to turn on whatever we put under the credits menu. So essentially, it's going to swap. And that's a little bit complicated, but I'll walk you through it. So under credits, we're going to add an image. And what I'm going to add is I'm going to add our logo here. You can put whatever you want on the scene. You can put instructions. You can put whatever. And I'm just going to drag it up into this corner. Just give me a little bit of time. I'm going to make it look nice and pretty. I'm also going to add a button, because what's important is being able to get back. So far what we have is you hit credits and you go here, but there's no way out of it. So I'm just going to make a quick little button. I'm going to go 0, 0, 0, and 0. And I'm going to add a image. And I can choose whatever I want. I can choose quit. Just minimize that a little bit. Make it smaller, make it nice and neat. And I don't think I like quit. I think I'm going to go with continue. Just for now. It doesn't really matter. Make sure you delete that text element. But we still have the button script on it. So this is going to do two things, this continue button. It's going to first turn off the credits, and then it's going to turn back on the main menu. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag on the button manager because it's all located in there. And then for the function, we're going to go display screen, game object. And we're going to drag on the button manager as well for another thing. And we're going to go button menus, and we're going to go hide screen game object. And what you drag into these, and the game objects you drag in here are the individual screens. So on that button, under display screen, we want to make sure when you click that button, it displays the main menu. And also it hides the current menu, the credits menu. Okay. So, let's make sure everything's in there. We want to make sure the button's in there. Turn it off. Turn the main menu back on. And let's do it over here too. So here we're going to do the opposite because you're already on the main menu, but you should know kind of what to do for now. Drag on the button manager, hide screen, add another function, drag on the button manager, go to display screen, and then you drag in to hide the current screen, which is the main menu. Whoops. You want to hide the main menu, and then when you click on the button, you want to show the credits menu. So, that should all be set up now. Let's try it. So, hit credits, credits are shown, continue, go back to main menu. See? It all works out just well. Also, let's just add a highlight to this when you highlight it. When you press play, so you can see the cyan highlight, everything works. When you make a build, just make sure you hide the credits menu because we don't want to show that right away. We want to first show the main menu when the game loads. Right? And you can play around however you want with this, make it look nice, as long as everything loads correctly. So feel free to play around with your newfound appreciation for buttons. With the different screens, you could probably make a text-based adventure game. I'm really interested to see what kind of experiments you might want to make with this.
So now, in the pause menu script, we're going to add a serialized field for the pause screen, so this is going to pop up when you hit escape. And we're also going to add a private boolean that is just checking if it's paused. And we're also going to make it a property so you can access it anywhere. In the property, we're going to have a get statement that is going to return if it's paused. and you gotta make sure that it's lowercase is paused, and then we're gonna set the value is paused is equal to whatever was passed through. We're gonna toggle the pause screen based on whatever you passed in. And the last thing we're gonna do is change the time scale. This is referring to how fast the time is interpreted. So 0 is there's no speed, so it's paused, and 1 is it's a normal speed, and we're gonna use that fancy syntax we used earlier. So on start, we're gonna set the pause game to false so that it doesn't start frozen. So now in update, we're gonna check if the escape key is pressed. And to do that, we're gonna do input.keyDown, and then you pass in the key code escape. And then we're just gonna pause the game and then flip whatever the current pause state is. And for pause game, all we're gonna fill in is just set the is paused, make sure it's the capital I paused, the property, and then whatever boolean we passed in. And that's it. And I'll see you next time in the Programming's Corner.
Right, and now we're going to deal with the pause menu. So we got this canvas going, and inside we have the HUD, but the other thing, and it's going to be an occasional heads-up display that is activated, is going to be the pause menu. So let's add an empty game object and put that in the canvas. This will be sort of like the parent for everything that's in the everything that's on the pause menu. We're going to call this pause menu. And in that pause menu, we're going to add an image. This image is going to operate as sort of like a holder for everything that is on the pause menu. So it kind of feels detached from the background. We don't want things to become confusing for the player. And for the pause menu, we're going to use this here background image. And what you can do is you can change the alpha transparency if you want to kind of see what's going on in the background. I don't really like that personally, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the anchor points and pull them in. And by doing that, it's going to sort of be a pause menu that appears just in the middle of the screen whenever you hit escape. Look at other games, see what they're doing, see what you like. Just for this, I'm gonna do sort of like a pause menu. When you hit escape, it's just gonna appear in the middle, and you can kind of see what's going on the edges. So I'm gonna drag this into the pause menu to make sure that it only appears here. I'm gonna call this a panel because it's holding all the components within. Right. So on the canvas, make sure you have this script called pause. We're going to deal with that more later, but generally you're going to drag the pause menu into that component there. All right. So here's the panel. Now we're going to add some buttons because these are going to be the things. So the pause menu comes up, and as you can see, it disappeared. Little thing about that, from calling, it's going to first grab whatever's on top, and then put the thing on bottom below that. So whenever you want the player to see something, make sure it's at the bottom of the hierarchy, or at least below whatever you want to be behind it. So this button, it's going to be set up just like every other button in existence that we've done so far. But what it's going to do is it's going to be connected to the pause menu. This is going to be the quit game button. So it's going to say, are you sure you want to continue? And we're just going to hit quit or continue. All right. I'm going to drag the anchor points to match kind of where we want them. And that's around where we want it. Make sure the button's in the panel. And scale it kind of where you want it to go. I think I want my quit button there. And I'm going to call this one button_quit. Kind of be consistent with whatever you want the buttons to be called. And this one's going to be button_continue. Because if you had guessed, this button is going to not quit, but continue. So when you pause, if you hit continue, it's going to close the pause screen. And if you quit, it's going to quit the game. So you can also add text elements, images, whatever you want. I'm just going to keep it simple. So when you pause the game, you'll just have these two buttons that are pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be continue or quit. As you can see, when we're in play mode, the screen appears, and that's just because it's turned on at the moment. But we have a couple more things we want to do. So we're going to try this one a little bit differently than what we did with the main menu. What we're going to do is, for the quit button, we're going to add a component, and we're going to add the button menus script. And then on click, we're going to drag on itself, basically, and we're going to add the quit game function. And we're going to add a red highlight to that one, because we want it to highlight red when we drag over it. It just looks nice. And for the continue button, let's make that highlight green. And test that out. So highlight red, highlight green, looks nice. And what we're going to do for this one is we're going to go to the canvas. And on the canvas, see this pause script? That's very important. So go to button continue, and on click, drag in canvas, and then select the function pause game. So what happens when you click on this is it will activate the opposite, unpause the game. Right? Go to pause menu, go to canvas, and drag in the pause menu. So when you hit escape, it's going to activate that menu. Make sure it's turned off. When we hit play, it doesn't appear. When we hit escape, it appears. And if we hit quits, let's go back in and just test or continue. We're in the game, collect a coin, jump, collect coin, hit escape, continue, and we continue. So everything's functional. So I hope you basically learned how that works. Generally, you're going to want this turned off, but our code will automatically check to make sure it's off when you hit play. But just in case there's an edge case, maybe make sure the pause menu is turned off and the HUD is turned on. Thanks so much for watching another episode of Brain Academy. On this episode, we dealt with the HUD and level design and basically everything that the player is interacting with. On the next episode, on shaders, we will be dealing with making our game look just a little bit more polished. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and stay frosty.